What if I told you the richest family in American history didn't just build wealth, they built a system so powerful, so quiet, that even today you feel its influence without ever hearing their name? Not on your phone screen, not in your daily news, not even in most history books. Because the truth is, some fortunes aren't just made, they're protected, hidden, reinvented. And the family at the center of it all didn't just survive generations, they rewrote the rules of power itself. Welcome to AM Story Archives.
Some stories were never meant to be found. Some truths were buried for a reason.
In the early days of America's industrial rise, when oil was still black gold and railroads stitched the country together like veins, there was one man who understood something others didn't. It wasn't just about making money. It was about controlling the flow of it. He didn't start as the richest. He wasn't even the smartest man in the room, but he was patient. Obsessively patient. While others rushed to expand, to compete, to dominate loudly, he moved quietly. He studied systems. He watched how men lost fortunes faster than they built them. And then he did something no one else dared to do. He stopped playing the same game. Instead of competing, he began absorbing. Instead of risking, he eliminated uncertainty. Instead of chasing opportunity, he created it. By the time the world realized what was happening, it was already too late. His empire wasn't just big, it was everywhere. Oil fields, railroads, banks, politics, and most importantly, influence. But here's where the story takes a turn most people don't know. Because the real secret of America's richest family wasn't how they made their first billions, it was how they kept it. When the founder died, many expected what always happens, a collapse, a slow unraveling, a family too large, too divided, too human to hold on to something that massive. History had shown it again and again. Great fortunes disappear within 3 generations, but not this one. Because before his death, the patriarch made a decision that would change everything. He didn't leave behind just money. He left behind a blueprint. His children didn't inherit wealth the way most people imagine. They inherited discipline, control, silence. From a young age, they were taught something that sounds simple, but is almost impossible to follow. Never let the world know how much power you truly have. So while other wealthy families built mansions and flaunted luxury, they did something strange. They stepped back. They disappeared from the spotlight. And in doing so, they became even more powerful. Over the decades, their wealth didn't shrink, it multiplied, quietly. While headlines focused on flashy billionaires, tech geniuses, and corporate empires, this family's fortune continued to grow, hidden behind foundations, trusts, and investments so complex even experts struggled to track them. Banks changed, markets crashed, empires rose and fell, but they remained, steady, untouched, almost invisible. At one point, their influence reached so far into the American system that critics began to notice patterns, strange ones, policies that seemed to benefit long-term capital, financial structures that protected generational wealth, institutions that carried their fingerprints without ever mentioning their name. But whenever questions were asked, the answers were always the same. Nothing concrete, nothing provable, just whispers. Because that was the genius of it all. They didn't control through presence, they controlled through absence. And then came the moment that should have exposed everything. A massive economic shift, markets collapsing, people losing homes, jobs, savings, everything. The kind of crisis that destroys even the strongest financial empires. But when analysts later studied the aftermath, they noticed something chilling. While millions lost everything, this family didn't just survive, they grew richer. It wasn't luck, it wasn't timing, it was preparation. Because for generations they had followed one unbreakable rule: never be vulnerable when the world is. So when others panicked, they moved. When others sold, they bought. When others feared, they calculated. And once again, they expanded their reach. But perhaps the most fascinating part of their story isn't their wealth, it's their invisibility. Ask the average person to name the richest families in America, and you'll hear the same names repeated. Names tied to tech, retail, media. But rarely the one family whose fortune has outlasted them all. Because unlike modern billionaires, they never wanted fame. Fame brings attention. Attention brings questions. And questions threaten control. Inside the family, traditions remained strict. Wealth wasn't just inherited, it was managed. Every generation was trained, guided, and sometimes restricted. Marriages were watched, investments were calculated, public appearances were minimized. To outsiders it might have seemed cold, even controlling, but to them it was survival. Because they understood something most people don't. Money is easy to lose. Power is not. Over time, their legacy evolved. They shifted from oil to finance, from finance to global investments, from visible assets to invisible influence. They funded universities, research, charities, shaping society in ways that seemed generous, even noble. And in many ways it was. But it also served another purpose. It kept them close to the systems that shaped the future: education, policy, innovation, while remaining far from public scrutiny. There are stories, unconfirmed but persistent, that their private meetings influenced decisions far beyond business, that their networks reached into places most people never think about, that their real power wasn't in what they owned, but in what they could quietly change. And yet, nothing has ever been proven, because they never leave traces. Today, their estimated wealth is nearly impossible to calculate, not because it's small, but because it's everywhere, spread across trusts, foundations, corporations, and investments that don't carry their name. Some experts believe their true fortune could rival or even surpass the wealth of the most famous billionaires alive today. But unlike those billionaires, they don't appear on lists. They don't give interviews. They don't seek attention. They don't need to. Because their story was never about being the richest in the moment. It was about being the richest forever. And maybe that's the most unsettling part. Because while the world chases success, fame, and recognition, this family mastered something far more powerful. They mastered permanence. So the next time you hear about the richest people in America, remember this: the ones you see aren't always the ones in control. And the greatest fortunes in history, they don't announce themselves.
They don't need to. They simply endure, quietly, across generations, hidden in plain sight.